Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our first Wake Up with a Wasatch webinar. We are so excited to have you. Today, Rich McDonald, our clinical director, will be kicking it off with how to cope or how we can help patients and colleagues cope with COVID-19 and all of the stress involved amid this crazy pandemic. So he's going to offer us some insights, and it is going to be a conversational webinar. So please write down your questions and we will take questions at the end. The way that you can ask questions is in your control panel. There should be a little bar that says questions, and you can go ahead and type those in. At any time during the webinar, I will save them and ask those questions to Rich at the end. We also have a handout. Rich will be using a presentation to kind of guide us through his lecture, but you can access this presentation in the handout section of that control panel. And you can download that and keep it for after the webinar is done. The first 10 attendees will get free coffee. So we will send you an email with a Starbucks gift card at the end of this webinar. I think that's it right now. We are going to be doing this weekly throughout the summer, so look out for an invite to upcoming webinars with Wasatch. I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Rich.
Excellent. Thanks, Kayla. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to join us this morning. So I was preparing the presentation. I guess my focus was on putting something together, just kind of thought-provoking, and I know I'm speaking to other professionals and people in the industry, so I hope it's just something that might give ideas or spark some thought, and I'm excited to hear any feedback anybody else has. And with that, we'll kind of get started. So, working in the healthcare industry, it's been very interesting through COVID. The one thing that I have had to remind myself consistently of is that we all respond so differently to this experience. And through that, I've tried to support my team here and our clients here and really keep open dialogue and really work on gaining insight from all the people that I come in contact with. Because we do all respond differently, and what I might perceive as a threat might not be the same for somebody else. And the reality is it really does impact recovery. One of the topics that we'll kind of get to is how that the inability to have face-to-face interactions has impacted what we can do and how we can support people in recovery following treatment. So that being said, I'm going to jump right in and talk a little bit about what collective trauma is. I've been, I guess I can do my intro here real quick. So I'm the clinical director at Wasatch Crest, and I've been here for 6 years this program, and I'm really proud of what we do here. So we're up in the Wasatch or the Wasatch County Heber Valley, and surrounded by beautiful mountains and outdoors, and we really do everything we can to incorporate that into each client's experience and get them reconnected with their surroundings. We're lucky to live where we live. So what impact does the pandemic have on our collective mental health? I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me initially was the broad response and collective trauma. and as I kind of dug into the topic, it was interesting. So most of the research that's been done on collective trauma, that research comes from clinical work with the first and second generation Holocaust survivors. And it's really where understanding that transgenerational trauma comes into play. And, there's a lot of experiences from the past that we can look to for kind of how long-term effects, what those will look like, but we really don't know because there's so many factors that were not in play previously. Things like slavery, the Cold War, the nuclear arms race, Vietnam, 9/11, those would all be collective trauma. So Dr. Costello explained collective trauma is this way. When a large group of people, like a national, religious, or racial or ethnic group, suffers a massive trauma, there is a shared emotional bond among the wounded individuals. And essentially, first of all, it means a shared experience of helplessness, disorientation, and loss. And the one thing we do know is initially, we generally rally together in a crisis, an external crisis like a pandemic, will pull a social group together for a response. We saw it after 9/11, and we definitely saw it, I think, in the early days of this pandemic. So, one of when we look at the factors and understanding what's really going on. We've seen the pandemic, and as it's gone and become kind of an endurance race, essentially, it really can become exhausting. I have noticed really quickly, initially when everybody was going to the grocery store, almost everybody had a mask on, at least at the stores I was at. And I've noticed it's slowly falling away, right? People are getting exhausted. We're getting kind of, I don't know if comfortable is the right term, but that initial response is definitely leveled off. And, it's got to be a constant focus. Otherwise, we won't make it through and have the ability to endure to the end with the things that we need to do to respond appropriately. I think one of the reasons that I was focused on grounding was that we get to this point where it's like, okay, yeah, I've already heard this, I've heard this, I know. But the reality is that the threat is still real. And in the past, oftentimes when we've had a crisis, we've been able to easily connect with other people. We've had the ability to, reach out, see friends face to face. If you're in recovery, 12-step meetings, any of those communities have been super important to keep people connected. Now, we do have some new things that we haven't had in the past, obviously, what we're doing today, right? And the role of technology, I think, has helped a lot of people. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move along here. So the overall impact on mental health and wellness. So the pandemic in general pushes a lot of the mental health buttons that somebody, a good example, I guess, would be someone with a fear of flying, right? So they are, let's say, very fearful of flying, but not fearful of driving their car. Now, if you look at the statistics, right, driving a car, we've all heard this before, is more dangerous than flying. But regardless of that, when we drive our cars, we oftentimes feel more in control. We do it far more often. And when we get on an airplane, we're trusting that the pilot knows what he's doing, and we have less control over what is going on, perceived or not, right? And so I think one of the most difficult things with mental health and wellness has been during the pandemic has been that we really don't have a clear idea of what we need to do to stay safe. In the big picture, we don't know, or we lack confidence in the response oftentimes, and coming together as a community's got to be, it's so crucial, because that connection is super important to make it through and to have positive mental health. And most of us with this current situation have been focused on physical health, right? Like wear a mask, wash your hands, wear gloves, and social distancing, doing all those things that we've been told to do that will help keep us safe. And there is quite a bit of stuff out there about the mental health piece, but we really need to be spend some time thinking about it so that we can support others and support the people around us, whether it's caring for clients or working with our other staff and peers, and with our own families. So one of the things that I've been, I honestly don't think we know a whole lot about, like so technology versus technology connecting through Zoom, FaceTime, whatever, versus the human connection, right? So face-to-face visits and actually being able to see somebody face-to-face in the same room. I do not believe it's the same. I think it's definitely can be supportive and better than nothing, but at the same time, I don't think it's the same. So, I've done several Zoom 12-step meetings, and while it's been helpful, it hasn't necessarily been the same experience. And some of it's been kind of cool. You can go to a meeting in England on your computer, but it's not the same thing. And I heard a podcast with Brene Brown, and she said that social media is great. This is me paraphrasing. Social media is great, but really it's a communication tool, not a connection tool. And so that is continually kind of run through my mind. Like, we've got to remember that all of the virtual 12-step and Zoom and, speaking with our family over FaceTime and video chat, all of that is helpful. But my fear is down the road that it ends up becoming kind of the new normal. I think some of that will stay in place for sure, but we can't forget how important it is to connect with the people that we care about, and even strangers face to face. I do know that probably one of the biggest threats to recovery is isolation. One of the quotes that I really like, and I'm sure most of you have probably heard it, is that the opposite of addiction is connection. Sorry. And I totally believe that. I think that the biggest way we can support those people that are trying to get sober or with depression or anxiety is really that ability to connect. Touching on kind of the virtual 12-step again, I really think that time will kind of tell how has impacted people's recovery. It's been interesting to hear stories of new admissions coming into Wasatch Crest. And I've already heard too many times to count that I was doing really well, and then the pandemic hit, and I was staying at home bored, and I slipped. And I have a feeling that that's going to be something we hear more and more across the board. So that being said, what can we do to help instill a sense of calm and hope? The biggest thing really that I've been working with clients on and with staff is to be present and acknowledge the fear, not being avoidant. It sounds simple, but we really don't understand how other people view the threat of the pandemic. And so listening to what they're saying and actually acknowledging that you hear what they're saying is a big deal. You know, don't minimize another person's fear. It's the one thing, you know, being here at Wasatch Crest, you'll have one staff member that you see hand sanitizer out every 5 seconds and doing, you know, everything they can, being hyper vigilant, and somebody else who's doing what they need to do, but there's a difference in response, right? Keeping clients safe and doing all those things that need to happen. And some people are hyper vigilant and some people need to be reminded. And when I'm saying that, I'm actually thinking of my kids. I've got one daughter who is really, really careful, and another who just doesn't seem to be too worried about it. So I've been working with both of them on it, and the response and the difference in their response has been really interesting. You know, promote dialogue around compassion, talk about, you know, how they are feeling, and really allow the emotional response to occur. A big one, I know for me personally, and something that I definitely promote with clients, is movement and exercise. I think that if you can get outdoors and get on the trail or even go for a walk down to the bottom of the driveway, I think that is a big deal. Setting some goals around movement and exercise is super important. It helps with a sense of accomplishment, and it also gives at least the perception of some control. It's something that you can actually make a plan and do. You know, it allows you to see the bigger world around you. And really, for me, one of the biggest things is that disconnection from media and the constant information overload, right? We're getting told again and again, and especially with the current situation, like we all need a break from media. And, you know, the other big piece is sleep and nutrition. I think that sleep deprivation piece and the anxiety of the pandemic has caused some people to not sleep as well as they might normally. And that's a big factor in anxiety and depression and staying, you know, well as a whole. So, you know, making sure that people have access to the digital services that are available. You know, we're keeping a physical distance as we socially distance, but being aware that we don't necessarily need to keep an emotional distance, right? So being honest, somebody asks, how are you doing? You know, and it's somebody that really wants to know, are we being congruent, and encouraging people, you know, to really tell you where they're at and how they're feeling. One of the things that I noticed has been helpful for people around me is just kind of unstructured video conferencing, right? You get on and have a meal together, especially early on. I think that really helped without an agenda, right? So a lot of times we plan these Zoom meetings and there's a specific agenda, and it's super important that we are, you know, have that time to just talk. And then, you know, address the shared helplessness, like focus on what feelings you do share with your fears and anxiety around what's going on. One thing is with understanding how people respond is super important. So we all have different coping mechanisms. So for me, I know that if I'm anxious, having a bad day, have a big decision to make, my solution is to put running shoes on and go for a trail run. We all have different coping mechanisms. So it's super important to help people identify those and understand what those look like. And people's capacity for resilience is not the same for everybody, right? Some people's experience or life experience has given them better skills maybe to be resilient than somebody else might have. even when we share the crisis, we have to understand that it's not the same, and how we respond is definitely individual. And the thing that I have kind of focused on with some of the people that think, oh my gosh, I can't wear my mask anymore. Well, it's really not about the individual, it's about society as a whole. We have a responsibility. We don't understand what everybody's going through in detail. So while we can attempt to understand, I don't know if somebody's got a husband at home going through chemotherapy or a newborn, and just understanding that we don't know everybody's situation and being socially responsible is really important. And what has been helpful for me is to just pause for a minute and just say, how you doing? Tell me about like what you're thinking. It's been difficult because we don't know what the long term or what the resolution will be. We probably know a little bit about what needs to happen, but we don't know how it's actually going to end. And earlier I touched on the initial response versus the long-term response. So, our human brain scans information for danger. We're looking in every direction, and our initial response, the fight or flight or freeze, when that's activated in our brains, it suppresses logic. Our respiration rises, blood moves to the larger muscles, and we get ready to run or fight. And so, that the fight or flight response really turns us inward, right? We're protecting ourselves. So in 1954, a man by the name of Enrico Quarantelli, he was a sociologist. He was the first guy to really study what happens during disasters. And one of the stories that he tells is about a woman who hears an explosion. She thinks it's in her house. So she runs out of the house, realizes it's something down the street, and turns around and realizes she hasn't grabbed her baby. Mothers generally are protected, or parents in general, their go-to would be to grab their child, right? Well, when we panic, that piece kind of goes out of the window, and it's fight or flight. So initially, everybody was gung-ho, I think. We saw that. And then as the pandemic has progressed, really the crisis fatigue sets in. And, depending on who you're speaking with, it's definitely been interesting to see the different responses. There's a lot of people that have a lack of confidence in that collective response. And just the fact that we don't know when there might be a vaccine or exactly how this is going to end. Is there going to be another spike? And everybody has a different opinion. It's super important as we walk through this that we focus on the facts. There's a lot of information out there, but stick to the facts. The one thing to remember too, when you're thinking about the long-term effects of this is, it isn't completely unknown. While there are different facts out there and different information coming in, we do know how infectious disease spreads. And we do know that in the past, with outbreaks like this, we have been able to control it. So there are certain factors that we can control for ourselves, and if everybody's doing their part. I think, in general, I would just close with, the biggest thing with recovery and the thing that makes the difference is that connection piece. And whatever that looks like, being able to pause long enough to listen, to work with each other, and really focus on the solution and stay out of that fear mindset as much as possible, and seek to understand one another. It's it's something that we can definitely find ways to make a difference and contribute. And it's important that we all take it seriously and seek insight from other people and how we can support one another.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Rich. We are going to take questions. So again, the way that you ask questions is by going into your control panel and using the drop down bar that says questions, and you can type in your questions. We do have some questions right now, Rich. So one is, you said that you have been leading 12-step meetings lately. Obviously, technology can't take the place of face-to-face connection, like you said, but do you have any advice for incorporating more personal connection into virtual therapy, in virtual meetings?
I think that the biggest piece is that setting aside some time. So what I found when we run our alumni support group on Wednesdays, I always start with the check-in with all of the alumni that are attending, and then at the end, just build in space for some kind of unstructured connection. And it's made a big difference. Like I last week we sat there probably for 20 minutes and they kind of caught up with each other and I told them what was going on with their life. But having that, you know, as opposed to sticking to a topic, really allowing for some unstructured communication and ability to connect. And we also did a kind of a challenge to have a picture for the next alumni meeting of something they did related to self-care, and it was pretty cool. Like they all were, hey, I went this far, and sending each other pictures, and I felt like that really kind of having a shared goal helped them connect with each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are super good ideas. Another question is, since so many people, like you said, might be turning to alcohol or drugs as an unhealthy coping method to handle all of this stress, what how can we help clients maybe find a healthier coping method? Do you have maybe an example of a client that you've helped discover a more healthy coping mechanism?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of a specific example would be we had a client that came in and I knew that, so she went through she's been sober for about a year and I guess it kind of struggled the last few weeks. And I talked to her on the phone. We were talking about, you know, what she's doing to take care of herself. And we did kind of some of the stuff I said. She's around self-care and kind of working on that piece. And I knew that she loved animals, talked to her about that and said, is there any service opportunities? Is there anything you can do to help, like get outside of yourself? And she ended up volunteering, helping walking. I guess some of the older people in the neighborhood had some dogs that needed walking. She just posted something on social media and said, does anybody need help with anything? I'm looking for something to do to be of service. I think there's still ways that we can do that, even with the social distancing piece. You know, mindfulness practices. I have a client last week that talked about getting on Spotify, and there's guided meditation series. There's some that last 5 minutes, and really setting aside time for that self-care piece, and then reaching out, right? The isolation piece is the biggest thing, I think, is getting outside of yourself.
Yeah, wow, that's really insightful. I have seen those Spotify meditations, and I have been taking advantage of them. So if you guys listening haven't seen those, I would definitely check those out. But yeah, there's so many resources that companies are putting out there for mindfulness and wellness that I think we can really take advantage of. Another question is, like you said, we are kind of coping with this new normal and trying to figure out what that means. And we don't know where the light is at the end of the tunnel. So how can we kind of provide hope to clients? What can we say when we don't really know what the end game is?
Yeah, no, that's actually really good. That when I was putting the information together, I was thinking about exactly that. I think that, because we don't know, it's really sticking to what we can control, right? So we're taking the precautions, doing the social distancing, and staying outside of ourselves and being thoughtful about what we're doing on a daily basis is super important. But the reality is that, yeah, we don't know when it's going to end. And so being able to stay present is a big deal. I think it's really easy to kind of, for example, this is a personal experience. I had a neighbor that I found out was positive with coronavirus. And I was talking to my kids, was anybody over in their yard? It re-amplified the anxiety piece. And luckily that wasn't the case. None of them were actually next door. But it really, that night I kept thinking, how long is this going to last? And I think it's really about staying present, day to day, like what can we do to make sure that we are connecting? And because we really have to focus on what we can control. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but we do know that there are certain things that we can do to help keep us safe. So, when the previous question made me think, the first thing we tell people to do in recovery is that if they are triggered or they're having unhealthy thoughts or they're struggling with anxiety, is to pick up the phone and connect with somebody else. And I think making sure that when a client leaves Wasatch Crest, we identify 3 to 5 sober support people, have their phone numbers, their email addresses, they reach out before they leave, and they know that they're on speed dial so that they have people they can quickly connect with.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So another question is, how can we, as mental health care providers, communicate to our clients the risk of contracting versus the implications of living in fear? So how do we kind of help our clients walk that fine line?
No, that's a really good question. I think identifying the risks, first of all, and controlling what we can control, like I said before, but piece and then what strategies do we go to? So understanding that it's absolutely a fine line, right? Like anxiety and fear drives poor mental health. And so I think really understanding, sticking to the facts, and staying focused on still progressing with life is super important. Like life is still happening. And I think it's really easy to kind of get in that mode where it's like, okay, well, once this is over, it'll be okay, right? But the fact that it's something we're going to probably, or we will live with for a while, I think it's super important to really just understand where we're feeling the anxiety, what that looks like for the individual, and help them identify it and find some acceptance with the fact that it may be long term, and staying realistic about what we need to do to keep life moving forward.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we have today. Thank you so much, Rich. I guess just to close, we are hosting another session next week. I think it tells us the upcoming topics, Rich, if you want to scroll down on that presentation. So yeah, June 10th, same time next week, same day or Wednesday next week. Rich is going to be talking about incorporating movement and nature into talk therapy. So that should be super, super interesting because Wasatch Crest does specialize in recreational therapy. So Rich will provide some insight onto that. The following week, we're going to get creative with therapy. So we're going to be talking about the role of art and making things in recovery and how that can help the healing process. And then the following week, we're going to be talking about the healthy role of hobbies in addiction recovery. So, like, kind of like we were saying, what healthy coping methods can we provide clients in addiction recovery? Passion plays a huge role in creating a new life for someone in recovery. So, those are the upcoming topics. Look out for an email from Wasatch to sign up for those. I think that's it. Rich, do you have anything else?
No, thank you so much, everybody, for your time, and hopefully that provoked a little bit of thought. And I hope you guys join us next week. I'm really excited about next week's topic, and I'll get specific with some experiences I've had with clients, and it's made a big difference in the way I work with our clients at Wasatch Crest, and I get super excited about it. So hope you guys will listen in.
Great, thanks. And we will be sending the first 10 attendees of this session $5 Starbucks gift cards. So look out for that. And it will be the same free coffee offering for the following session. So we look forward to seeing you guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.